All right, guys. Welcome to Million Browser Botnet. I'm Matt Johanssen.
I'm Jeremiah Grossman.
We both work for White Hat Security. Well, work for is a loose term.
Hey, everybody. So we're here from White Hat Security. It's a little bit about what we do. The entire talk here is going to be about browser security, which is rather ironic since most of what we do is website security. The company headquarters is in Santa Clara. We've been around for about 12 years. And all of that time hacking websites and finding vulnerabilities in them. So it's a really fun job to be able to hack hundreds and hundreds of banks and retailers and healthcare providers whenever you feel like it. Our little twist, if you want to call it vulnerability assessment, is a software as a service platform where we constantly hack the same sites over and over and over again. So we get to do a lot of research in the meantime, and right now we're about 340 employees. About 140 of those were hired since about January of this time last year. So we've been doing pretty well.
We have about 20,000 sites under service, so that's kind of our giant data pool that we come to this presentation with that data in the back of our minds.
Just a little bit about my background. So my background is all web security, so I can break browsers, break websites, and code and all that kind of stuff, but don't let me touch your DSL routers or anything like that, or PIX firewalls. I won't know what the hell I'm doing with them. But I spend I have three basic jobs. One is I talk to a lot of companies all over the world about their web security challenges, what works, what doesn't work, and I try to learn from them. It's a big part of the job is to learn from the people in the field doing the defense work. Second part of my job is, since we're hacking all those websites all the time, we get great analytics, who's vulnerable to what and how often. So I take what customers teach me, and then I learn from stuff at work on hundreds of terabytes of data. And then third part of the job is why I'm here, is to share back out the things that I learned with everybody else.
And I started just hacking websites day in and day out, and I turned to the dark side of management. At least it wasn't sales, though, right? So now I lead a hacker army of, I think, what's our department at? Like 120 web hackers. I head up the team out in Houston, formerly in Santa Clara, and I'm hiring a ton. As he said, we've kind of blown up. So if you're looking for an entry-level AppSec job, come talk to me, Houston or Santa Clara. That's enough about us.
Okay, so that's us. That's what we do. Now, I'm at an AppSec conference. I'm going to try to teach you guys the way the web works. So bear with me here. So we know a lot about the way the web works. You guys know how SSL works, how HTTP works, and basic things like that. But the things I'm going to describe for you are just the fundamentals of the way web security or the web is supposed to work. So right now, when you go to a web page, you download some combination of HTML, cascaded style sheets, and JavaScript. For that moment in time, that web page has near complete control over your web browser to do anything that it wants. Your web browser, not your operating system, that will require some other kind of vulnerability in your browser. But now, alongside with that power, the code that you're downloading from that website, we get to do things like cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, clickjacking, and a whole host of other tricks. So we're going to talk about those things. And these things, when you really look at it, we call them vulnerabilities, but the nature of it and the reason they work is because this is the way the web was intended to be designed. This is how it works. So I'm going to go over these basic names here, and a lot of you might be familiar with these concepts. But this is kind of to illustrate the things that can happen to your browser right at the moment that you hit a web page, and there's nothing that you can do to patch against them. This is every one of 2 billion people online is affected by these, and it doesn't matter what browser you use. So we got things like browser interrogation, evil cross-site request forgery, login detection, de-anonymization, internet hacking, auto cross-site scripting, that's always fun. Drive-by downloads, you guys know a lot about that. And the last two, not a whole lot of people know about, but nonetheless very fun. It's distributed brute force hash cracking and application level DDoS, all in the browser.
So a quote before we move on from this slide, I really like this. This quote comes from a blog series that Jeremiah wrote called the I Know series. How many of you guys have read this one? No one? Oh my gosh, you gotta go do it. So this quote, I'm going to read it directly because I don't want to do any injustice. It says, unless you've taken very particular precautions, assume every website you visit knows exactly who you are and where you're from. It's a pretty powerful message to kind of get in the back of your brain, right? Unless you're very particularly protecting against yourself against this stuff, it's all on by default.
All right, so you go to a website. You guys heard of Core Metrics, Google Analytics, 1,000 other trackers out there. If you fire up your browser and you run it through a proxy or a little little third-party plugin on any one of the browsers, you'll see things like this. I got this from CNN. So this is a widget on the website loading up information about my browser's user agent, plugins, fonts, colors, screen dimensions, and it fires it all off to CNN.com, to metrics.cnn.com, and they capture it. They capture as much information as they possibly can for analytical purposes. I'd imagine everything that's good for them and not so good for me, at least my privacy anyway. But they get all this information. This is very, very helpful for CNN, but also for the bad guys' website that you might be visiting, because they're not using any exploit. This is just plain JavaScript. They used to do this. There's nothing particularly special about it. Probably do this in 30 lines. So that's one. Let's move on to something a little bit more aggressive. Now, I mentioned before that when you go to a website, that website can force your browser to make any web request it wants, generally speaking, to any location on the web or on the intranet. Now, normally these things are for images and cascaded style sheets in JavaScript, but there's nothing that says the browser can't be forced to hack other websites. For instance, the first one here is you could force a browser to do a SQL injection command on some target web server in the world and force them to hack another web server. You can just use one image tag and you could force them to download illegal content off some torrent server, make them search for embarrassing things such as Justin Bieber fan club. You can perform business logic flaw attacks on different banking websites and things like that, or you can cause them to vote on different things. Your creativity is the only limiter if you're the bad guy. So any request to any location, get or post, internet or intranet, it's all there. Let's move on one step. Now, at this point, I know who the user is and I can make them do my bidding, but I really want to know, before I force them to make requests, I would like them to be authenticated, so I'm going to see what websites that they're logged into. So there is you can have the slides later, but if you see the little URL here, it's part of the I Know Your Web Browser series, but this little snippet of code here that I put hot-wired in JavaScript into a library does login detection on the browser. So essentially what I do is I force the browser to make a particular web request to any one of these services, Facebook, Twitter, Yahoo, Google, Amazon, LinkedIn, and Reddit. And depending on the response that comes back from the website and how it responds, I can tell if the user's logged into any of those particular services. So right when you hit a web page, I know which one of these services you're actively using, and it becomes much more interesting to hack a user that's logged into Yahoo or Twitter at the time that you do so. All good? Okay. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument, you were logged into Twitter or Facebook. I know it's kind of rare, right? Now, I noticed that you're logged into Facebook, and I decide, let's put a like button over a dancing cat thing. And every place you move your mouse, I make the like button hover just under your mouse, and for good measure, I make it transparent. You click somewhere on the screen, the dancing cat, or get whatever you want, and you forcibly like something that the bad guy controls, and it says, Jeremiah Grossman just liked this particular thing on Facebook. Now, I've only served up that particular like button for that resource to one person ever. So since they're logged into Facebook, I've only served it to one person. Now I've done de-anonymization with a single click, and the user didn't know it. You can do the same thing with Twitter follow buttons. So the moment that you click on anything on the web page, which is kind of the antithesis of what you're supposed to do online, you give up your identity information in a heartbeat. So one click, I know you are. Now, I mentioned several times how you can force a browser to do your bidding, but what most people forget out there is that you can do intranet hacking this way as well. And this was first discussed, I discussed it back in 2006 at Black Hat. It remains unfixed to this day that I can force your browser to make web requests to the inside of the firewall and, well, just hit just about anything else and backdoor routers and things like that. So your intranet is fair game, and again, not much you can do about it in today's browser. It's on by default. If you know cross-site scripting vulnerabilities ahead of time, Google, Facebook, Twitter, and pick your website, I can force you to cross-site script yourself with an iframe using those and get control over that domain. Very easy. This kind of gets to be a reoccurring thing. There's not much you can't do in a browser. Drive-by downloads with iframes. You guys know how these work. These happen 1 million times a day. You just load them up. And there's 2 more here. I'm going to ask Matt to cover them.
Yeah, so this whole list of things that we're going through is things that you can do with a browser, right? So keep this in mind as we go through this, and we're going to get into our technique and actually get to this whole million browser botnet. These are all things that we could do with this browser botnet, right? So this is one that we did a little bit more research on. The end of this list here, right, is distributed brute force hash cracking. What would be a really good use of a browser botnet? Well, it's already distributed, right, just by nature of what it is as a botnet. Well, let's crack some hashes. Let's actually crack some passwords. So this researcher actually has already done this and released this tool and has gotten some pretty impressive crack rates with just using JavaScript in a browser. So as you can see, he reached 6 figures of MD5 hashes per second in guessing these things and cracking them. So the tool that he released is called Ravan. You can go look it up now. It's actually it does one little trick besides just using JavaScript in your browser to crack hashes. It uses what's called web workers. Who's familiar with web workers in the browser? Cool, a bunch of you. So this allows that 100,000 to multiply a number of times in a single browser. So with one browser, I think you can get 12 web workers. Does anyone
10 or, what is it, 10 or 12?
So something around there. You can get more than just your one browser. You can kind of treat your browser as an additional 9 browsers. And it looks like it got a little bit lower here, and you can see each one of these workers got down to about almost 70,000 hashes per second that he was guessing. So you can download these slides, look up these URLs. It's a really cool project. So this is the big one that we're going to focus on for the rest of the presentation, is application level distributed denial of service attacks. So again, this isn't anything new. In particular, the attack. A browser can send a really large number of requests, using cross-origin requests written in JavaScript, same researcher, 10,000 requests per minute from one browser. This is more of a traditional distributed denial of service attack. We didn't think that was big enough. We wanted to do something a little bit different, and we also were worried about the actual distribution of that JavaScript into these browsers to create this attack. We wanted to, okay, how can you get enough browsers to run your malicious JavaScript to try to denial of service some other website? So we looked into the ways to maximize the number of HTTP connections that a single browser can hold open at any single time. It turns out that number is 6. As you see here, do you want to talk about browser skills?
Sure. So at this point, we're just covering the basics here, everything that we've known thus far. One browser can do all the things we just discussed. We're just going to focus on denial of service, which is not to say we can't force a million browsers to do all that other stuff, but we're just going to focus on DOS because it was easy to measure. So when your browser interacts with a website and you have a whole bunch of image tags going to a singular website, the browser will max out at 6 simultaneous connections per hostname. That's all you get. It has to wait for the rest to come back before another one is initiated. So that's what you see in this browser scope thing here. Now, all these browsers here have the same limit on HTTP, but there's this strange little side effect that happens on Firefox, which I believe they consider not a bug, and I'll show you how this works.
Do the demo?
Oh, yeah.
Demo, we'll come back to the code.
Want to just demo first?
Yeah, we have a video demo.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can you guys see? It's a little small, huh? Sorry. We'll kind of narrate.
Can you guys at least see these numbers in the bottom left here? In the back, can you guys see these? No? Okay.
Probably just do the full screen there.
No,
Oh.
I knew that was going to happen.
Bummer.
I knew that was going to happen. Let's see if I can get this corner here. That's about as good as we're going to get.
All right. So I'll do my best to narrate. In this first tab here is just a straight vanilla Apache server 2.4.4. If that's not the latest version, don't worry about it, doesn't matter. This here is the Apache logs just being tailed. And I'm just hitting the status page over and over again to get these metrics here. And you can see here at the bottom here, there's one request currently being made and being processed. This is my HTML page that the user would land on that forces them to make a connection to my test, my victim server, as it were. Right here, I'm going to loop through the creation of a whole bunch of image tags, a whole lot of them. And notice the browser will only send 6 to 7 at a time to the website. So right now, it's just getting 6 or 7 to the web server, and it's maxing out because that's all the browser will send in any given amount of time. Okay.
So just a note about this is not a security feature, this is a performance feature, right, for loading images on a page.
So that will get done. Yeah. Pause.
Is the max connections an about config setting that you can tweak with JavaScript?
Yes. Yes. You can change it in Firefox, not in Chrome, because they don't have an about config. It's hard coded in config files pre-compile.
And even then, I do believe there is a max. I don't know what it is offhand.
All right, so we're going to rotate that back down to 0 because we don't need it anymore. Now, right here, can you pause here, Matt? Right there. This right here, this is a for loop that creates image tags, but instead of HTTP, I flipped it to FTP. And then I pointed the colon, because FTP defaults to port 21, I put it back to port 80. Okay? And then I'm going to cycle it. Okay. So this is a connection limit bypass in Firefox.
So you'll see the request currently being processed. I know in the back it's hard to see, but the number in the furthest bottom left corner is what we're looking at.
So when I rotate this up to, like, let's say 20, and you notice it goes up to 21 right there rather than maxing out at 7. So we're leveraging the browser. So right here, Apache is still cool. You know, no problem. I can do 20 simultaneous connections. And you notice here, it should come up in a second, but Apache and certain Apache installations will have very weird ways of, like, dealing with it. So now I'm going to rotate it up to 400. You'll see this, what happens right here at the bottom, 266, and this is where Apache dies. So one browser on Firefox, Apache dies. Dead. It fills up the connection pool on Apache.
So we're trying to refresh the status page here,
Yeah.
and it's not refreshing anymore.
Yeah.
The other weird thing about the
So-
FTP, and when we switch over there, is that it stops coming up in the logs, in the tail logs. Like you're not seeing that traffic anymore.
So if you're a bad guy running a blog, a Firefox browser comes to your page, you use this FTP trick, you point them at a web server, and you kill that web server. Pretty easy.
This is all with one browser, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, we're just showing how dead it is for the next 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. So Apache is a hard-coded connection limit of 255 simultaneous connections, and we max that out with FTP. So that's the extent of the code that you need to do that.
It's a little bit bigger for those of you who had a hard time seeing the code, right? It's pretty easy. Just a little for loop.
Yep. So what is that, 6 lines of JavaScript? Fun.
Yep.
All right. So everything that we've learned so far, no malware to detect. There's no exploits, no 0 days. Can't patch it. There's no traces. There's very few alarms. And we can prevent browser caching in case we wanted to get the code off of everybody's browser. We can do that. Everyone's browser is vulnerable. This is super, super easy. And best of all, it's meant to work this way.
I mean, look, everyone can kind of read this code, right? Like, you know, this is literally the entirety of the code that we wrote during all of this research. It's really easy, and we're just loading image tags. So the web is supposed to load image tags, right? So kind of a point that I touched on earlier, right, is how do we get this JavaScript out into these browsers to run it, right? To actually try to generate any sort of attack, be it denial of service, hash cracking, the auto XSS, auto CSRF, all the stuff that we talked about at the beginning. So these are all the traditional ways of distributing that. You guys have heard of all of this. None of this is new, right? These things have been talked about for years, right? You can do some phishing. You can put the JavaScript on your own website. You can do it man in the middle, inject the JavaScript back on the response. You can search engine poison. I don't think any of this is big enough. Right? I don't think any of these methodologies of distributing the JavaScript is going to be big enough to generate enough traffic to actually do a legitimate DDoS attack and cause anyone any problems. So
We're going to invoke Crockford.
we're going to invoke the Crockford, as Geraldine said.
So about, what's like February, March of last year, Mr. Crockford, who wrote several books on JavaScript, I think, says the most reliable, cost-effective method to inject evil code is to buy an ad.
So we did.
Yeah, we did.
We bought a few of them. So how many of you are familiar with how the advertising ecosystem actually works? Like, okay, a few of you, cool. So for those of you who don't know, it's not just, hey, I would like to advertise on your website, here's some money and here's an ad and please put your ad on your website. There's these middlemen called advertising networks that are going to do all of this for you. So I'm an advertiser. I'd like my ad to start showing up in as many browsers as possible. So when I say browsers, you can think people, or they're going to think people. Impressions is a word that they're going to use. You're usually charging by impressions. I had to learn this whole new language in advertising land of the words that they used, right? So I'm going to go to them. Here's my ad. Here's my money. I want, I'm going to put as much money in here, and it's going to cost X amount per 1,000 impressions, right? And when I hear impressions, I think browsers, and they go ahead and distribute that ad through whoever they have relationships with, be it Facebook or other blogs or news sites or whatever it is, right? So, for example, we were sitting in a speaker prep room the first time we gave this talk, and we were like, okay, what's a site with a lot of ads? I just want to take a screenshot, maybe, I don't know. We were just kind of messing around trying to see what we get. We were like, TMZ probably has a ton of ads, right? So this is the kind of stuff you're used to seeing, right? You go to an advertising network. So this free credit score company went, to the advertising network, gave them this banner, gave them money, and it just happened to show up. If I refresh this page, it'll be a different one, right? We just thought it was really funny we had to include it because it said ad serving done right, see what's possible. I was like, okay, yeah, I think we will, right? Like, we're going to actually see what's possible. I don't think that's what they meant, but we're going to. So here's a bunch of these advertising networks. We had to put a little disclaimer because we realized with our template, it looked like we were one of them. White hat, not an advertising network. So here are all these other ones. You guys have probably heard of some of the bigger ones like DoubleClick. A lot of these, Google AdSense, some of these don't allow you to actually give them your JavaScript and then them just turn it around and dish it out everywhere, but a lot of them do without blinking, right? So here's money, here's my JavaScript, go, right? And they go. But we realized that they were some of the smaller ad networks. So Jeremiah tried to use some clout, and this is an email we got back. Do you want to talk about that?
I was so disappointed that some of them didn't allow JavaScript in their ads, so I asked if I could pay more money.
If we ask nicely, will they let us put the JavaScript in?
And they said yes. The only third-party code we allow is that from large ad-serving companies like DoubleClick and such who we trust.
Oh, okay, at least you trust them, right? They're already doing the vulnerability scanning, so yeah, cool. They're trustworthy. We're definitely not. Well, we weren't, so good on them. But, so then there's another type of service out there that we had never heard of until we were doing this research that we also utilized in this attack. It worked a lot in the same way that as the ad network did as far as our purposes go. There was no advertising being sold or transacted, but it was actually browser renting time. You just rent browser time. You give them money for X amount of browser time, CPU time, and that's it, right? So for about $12.50, we got 10,000 minutes of browser time to just, you give them a URL and they guarantee over some interval of 10,000 minutes that a browser or multiple browsers will be on that URL. I cannot think of a legitimate purpose for this company to exist. I have no idea. But it works for us terrifically because
we were generating legit traffic.
Yeah, a lot of traffic, right? But why this was useful was because in advertising network land, when I said these impressions that we were paying for, there's no guarantee on time, right? And if you're doing something like hash cracking, remember the other slide, it was how many per second that you could crack. Well, what if my ad was only on for 1 second for each of these 1,000 browsers? That's, I have no guarantee. Here I have 10,000 minutes guaranteed, right? It's not all at once, but it's guaranteed and it's dirt cheap. So yeah, we're going to focus on these three. I don't know why the slide's here. So the part that we thought was really cool about this, and as we were going through a lot of these ad networks, is the economics are just ridiculous. It is really, really cheap. It goes from right around a penny to $5, and this is per 1,000 impressions that we're going off.
Per 1,000 browsers.
So yeah, you can hear browsers. You could also hear bots. These all words are going to mean the same thing in this presentation, right? So per 1,000 bots in my botnet, the one that we wound up going with was 50 cents. Okay, so 50 cents per 1,000 bots in the botnet. So the million browser botnet would cost you $500. I just did math. Watch out. Yeah, this was really, really easy, really, really cheap. In the entirety of the research that we were doing, we hadn't spent $10 while we were DOSing ourselves over and over again, and we'll get to that. We tried to crank it up, and spend a lot of money, and we put like $70 in it. I mean, and then we'll get to it later. We wound up putting a decent amount more cash in it, but still, we never hit $500 or anything like that. So this is kind of what it looks like when you go to an ad network. This is kind of the browser panel that they're going to give you, and this is where I had to learn a lot of their terminology. So since I'm probably the only person that's ever used an ad network in the way that I'm using it, a lot of this stuff just didn't matter to me. So I had to try to figure out how to navigate these waters of which kind of keyword lists I would like to target and geolocations I would like to target. I don't care as long as it's a browser, right? I didn't care. So I picked computers as the keyword. I'm sorry, all of you. And I just tried to wild card everything, right? Yeah, send it everywhere all the time. Just get through this. But they give you very granular control here of where your ad is served up. So in my mind, they give you very granular control here over where my malicious JavaScript is served up. Great, thank you. So they do all the targeting for me. I don't have to target anything. So you can kind of see some of the costs. So I just add money to this machine that is this ad network, right? I give it a time frame and money, and it goes and kind of kicks in and does its thing. So I think at the time I gave it $25 and said, hey, max out like $1 a day. And let's see what happens. When I took this screenshot, it was $12, right? Because I was feeling frisky or something. I think the funniest part about this entire screenshot, do you guys see this little table here? The last 10 days of activity. The first day I ever did it, I got 8,000 impressions, right? It cost me $4. I got 15 clicks.
We didn't want the clicks.
I didn't want clicks. I didn't even try to get anyone to click. I'll show you the ad in a few slides. It was not something worth clicking on. I didn't even. Oh, anyway. Yeah, so this is pretty cheap. You can kind of see other things that they're kind of talking about, right? You can run multiple campaigns. This was another thing I had to kind of wrap my brain around. You're running ad campaigns. So I only ever ran one, but you can run multiple of these simultaneously and generate a lot of different things all over. So here was the fun part. Here's the text box to enter your code. Great, thank you for this text box. There was a few options. It was either give them an image and a URL, or click on the HTML/JavaScript thing here to just write your own HTML and JavaScript. So of course I was going to do that. So we were kind of tweaking our code a little bit as we were writing this. Just trying to figure out how to make sure that the connections were opening up before we really cranked it up and tried to loop through as many as we can per browser. Just making sure that we had a browser on our side that we could see the connections coming in. But this is a good time to talk about their approval process. Every time that, yeah, there is an approval process. Every time that you changed this code, or anytime you changed anything in the ad, it needed to be approved, okay? Approved basically meant for them, but it was an actual human, so there was a time delay here. I had to wait for a human during business hours to go in, look at it, and approve it. So it was kind of annoying to me. But their approval process was, is it an image that fits in the box that I gave you? And when I click it, does it actually go somewhere? Approved, okay? They didn't care about anything else. Those are the two criteria. And I'm sure, yeah, if it was like nudity or something like that, they'd make sure that it was in the right channels. But for me, it was, does this image fit in this box? And if you click it, does it go somewhere? So we were tweaking this code, and I just really didn't want to keep waiting for this person on the other end to keep approving it. So can anyone spot the change that I made here? I went from writing my JavaScript in the box to, scream it out. Someone say it. What'd I do?
Source.
Script source. Script source equals, here's my external JavaScript file, right? So instead of writing my code directly in the ad and getting it approved every time, I just sourced in a file, and I can edit that file as much as I want on the back end, never got reapproved whatsoever. So even if some mythical day in the future, ad networks decide to hire an army of static code analysis who are really good at JavaScript, and they analyze my code and they say, yeah, this guy's not doing anything bad, as soon as it approves, I can switch it, right? There's just no way to kind of keep on top of that scalably. Here's my ad. Get a 30-day free trial. Claim now. 15 clicks.
For what?
Yeah, 30-day free trial. What? I have no idea. This is actually This is the ad off of the White Hat homepage because I was lazy and just went to the homepage. I was like, I need a banner ad. What?
I think it's safe to say like every single one of those clicks was fraudulent.
Yeah, I was like, hey, we're paying for this. I might as well actually advertise for my company, right? And then it wasn't until later that I didn't realize that it doesn't say White Hat in the picture. Like, it says nothing. It just says 30 days free. So you can see which ones were approved and not. And I was like, hey, here's an image. Just throw it in all these boxes. I just want this code in browsers. I don't care about what it looks like or anything like that. They cared about what it looks like. But you can see all of these got denied except for the one that fit in the box, right? So from the code from the connection limit bypass that we were talking about, right? That was one browser. There was one Firefox browser pointing at one instance of Apache. We were like, okay, what if we're going to do this in the ad network now. Let's point it at an Amazon instance of Apache that's ourselves, distribute our code through the ad network, and just try to generate as much traffic from the ad network, just loading image tags to myself as possible, and see if I can DOS myself. So this was the code, really, really complicated.
So you notice we're just looping through and creating.
PhDs in the room that could read this and analyze it for us.
It's just 10,000 image tags going to our Amazon AWS instance.
So we did 10,000 again because we wanted to measure, while we were looking at the logs, we wanted to get a feel for how long our code was running in the browser, right? Because in the ad network, that's not guaranteed. Remember, that was the other one, the browser renting thing. So this one, it was like, okay, let's loop it to 10,000 and see how far towards 10,000 we get, right, in one browser. Again, we started with just the HTTP, so we're not doing the connection bypass limit. So this is just 6 or 7 at a time of these images coming out of the web browser, and we wanted to see how close to 10,000 we would get. A few times we got close. Most of the time we were in the few hundreds to low thousands. So I don't know, 30 seconds-ish per browser, I guess, on average. All right, you want to talk through this? So we have demo here because we did this live at one point.
This is similar as the video. This is our Amazon AMI instance. If you just went to the status page, this is what you'd see. The number of simultaneous requests. We're going to focus here when we did it, traffic, how much traffic we're sending, and then up top there you see the web server logs. And so we'll just keep clicking through. So 5 simultaneous requests, so the campaign's kicking off, so we're hitting 5 simultaneous requests. We're kicking off this campaign too at the same time, so we can just keep clicking.
So this is the browser minute sharing service that as soon as you turn that on, it starts generating traffic for you, like immediately. That was another thing that was good about it. But it wasn't a lot at once. It wasn't a flood, right? It was kind of a trickle. But it was cool that it was immediate. So we turned it on, and you see 8 minutes later, we had generated 4,000 hits to our website in 8 minutes.
Right there, 4,130 total access.
5 at a time. That's one browser currently, right? You'll see that go up a little bit if it's multiple browsers at the same time. But
so now it's 10 minutes in. We're at 15,000 total accesses, 5 simultaneous requests.
Oh, so this was funny. So how many of you are familiar with Phantom.js? Neil here. Neil wrote Phantom Gang, which is really cool. Check that out. So Phantom.js, for those of you who don't know, is a headless browser. So it looks like people are. So there's one of 2 scenarios here. Either people are gaming the system. So I forgot to mention this. In the browser renting service, there was 2 ways to get browser time. You could either pay them or give browser time for browser time. So you could just say, hey, yeah, I'll load my browser up and look at this URL. In exchange, I'll get browser time, to use for myself. So 2 situations here that Phantom.js would start showing up in our logs through this service. Either people are gaming that system, right? People are scripting browser time to gain minutes out of them, or that service is gaming us, right? And it's not actual browsers, it's Phantom.js loading our things. For our purposes, it didn't matter, right? Like, we just want connections open. I didn't care if it was Chrome, Firefox, Phantom.js, or anything like that. So that was just cool thing that we saw.
So moving on, we're 15 minutes in, 28,000 not 28,000 simultaneous, 28,000 total so far in only 15 minutes. 22 minutes in, it's at 61,000, so we're getting pretty good. 33 simultaneous requests, so we're getting there. Then we're 25 minutes in, 82,000, 19 simultaneous requests. The advertising network still hasn't kicked in so far, so you'll see that come up.
This is all the browser minute sharing service.
So we're up to a half an hour, 100,000 requests, 9 simultaneous. Go ahead.
You want to generate some hits to your website, right?
And let's see, where are we at here? We're at 45 minutes in. It starts to kick in, 133,000 total. The advertising network kicks in, and we immediately pin the Apache web server at 255 simultaneous requests. So we DOSed it with the ad network, just one Apache, and it cost us less than 25 bucks. We're thinking probably per hour on the ad network this way, you can take down one Apache server for about $5 to $10 per hour.
So this is all just a connection flood, right? We're just trying to open as many simultaneous connections as possible to a web server. So it's not a traditional denial of service where it's usually measured in gigabits per second, right? How much data could I throw at this web server? So you're like, okay, well, we were just requesting some 404 page. What happens if we request something that actually has some data size to it? So we decided the AS badge was the good way to go as a JPEG. And you can see in 10 minutes here, we go from 43 minutes, we had 133,000 hits, but only 36 megs of transfer, right? Because that was just 36 megs of 404 pages. Yep. 10 minutes later, we were at 100 megs of traffic with just this kind of silly little JPEG. So we're like, oh, okay, we probably could generate some serious data uses also. But keep in mind, we were paying for our own bandwidth in Amazon, so.
Yeah, we're billing ourselves at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's half a gig, or quarter gig, I'm sorry.
This was 2 minutes later, though.
Yeah.
Another 100 megs in 2 minutes.
Now we're up to almost a gig and an hour total elapsed.
5 minutes after that. So yeah, it's picking up speed with just that little image.
And right now the web server is just barely hanging on at this point. So now we waited. We just said, we're good here. Let's just wait it. So we waited another 7 hours, and then we got it up to total transfer of over 100 gigs.
How many hits is that?
Oh yeah, total hits. Well, we're probably slowing ourselves down, but that total hits is, what is that?
32,000.
4.3 million.
I need commas.
Yeah. 7 million and quarter terabyte of transfer in 16 hours. So that's kind of expensive on the web server at that point. Especially because you're not spending much on the ad network side. The destination's spending a lot. So we keep going here, 18 hours. One day, about a little over a quarter terabyte and 11.4 million total accesses. Still got more, I was still counting up.
We basically pinned our Apache server for the whole day.
So yeah, then we started to kill it off and we're all good.
So we spent $35 on the ad network.
And we were being polite to ourselves.
We had a lot of minutes left, right? So.
Oh yeah, right there. I had bought 10,000. I had bought 10,000 for $12.
I think we bought another 10,000 because I think.
Oh yeah, we did e-commerce at Black Hat. Yeah, that's right.
not advisable. So okay, we can DOS our own Apache server, right? We proved that pretty easily. So we can DOS someone with no DOS protection, basically. So that was where we ended that research for a few months. But we really wanted to know, okay, can we generate could we take down an actual website that had actual denial of service protection, right? So we thought of, okay, who is one of the largest denial of service protection companies out there? Let's maybe ask them for some assistance. So we went to Akamai. We said, hey, Akamai, we have this thing. We'd like to try to do this.
It's a very strange combination.
Hear us out. Yeah. So we asked for a server that we could possibly point our browser botnet at that was potentially running through Akamai pipes, so we could see if we would even move the needle for them, how much it would cost to move the needle for them. So Michael Smith over at Akamai, great guy, he helped us out a ton. He said, yeah, I think I have one for you. It's called www.akamai.com. So
this is awesome. We had tacit permission to DOS Akamai.com.
Yeah, he was on the line. We had the get out of jail free card, and we pointed the botnet at Akamai.com. At this point, we said, let's spend some money, right? Instead of $35, let's actually I think we threw in $100, right? And let's see, $100 and max daily spend, only $100. It's still only $100, right? But let's get crazy. So this was the time period that we sent these requests over. So kind of at the beginning there, at the beginning of the graph, that's Akamai's normal web traffic, right, where it starts. And then this whole mess is what we generated. The scale there on the left, for those of you who can't see, is what is that? Requests.
So the blue line, that's rules triggered, HTTP rules that we're doing something weird, and the yellow line is requests denied. On the scale here, that's 200,000 and 400,000. So we exceeded 200,000 simultaneous requests during that moment in time. Can your Apache server do that?
Yeah. And I mean, I put in the $100. So again, you remember how it took 45 minutes to kick in? You don't really have full control over when the ad network is going to actually give out these impressions and run your code. It took 45 minutes to kick in. It's kind of lumpy. It's kind of lumpy with internet traffic, right? When are people online seeing those ads? So this was kind of like, let's throw $100 at it, tell it that it can spend $100 in the next day, and see what happens.
I believe that drop there, that was the FTP, right?
No, that's the next slide.
Okay.
So you can kind of see here, this is just this little time window right here, extrapolated over this whole thing. So in the first time that we did the research, we never actually deployed the FTP Firefox connection bypass in the ad network because we were scared to do that. So we just did the HTTP, we just did 6 at a time. So the whole thing here, we were just hacking ourselves the whole time, right? So I never wanted to negatively impact any person that would load my ad. So I was just requesting images normally, right? This time we just got too curious to not, right? So we were like, okay, let's deploy the FTP code to the ad network while it's pointed at Akamai, since we have all these pretty graphs. So we started, we didn't do the FTP code at first. You can see at the beginning of this graph, okay, first of all, normal Akamai web traffic. That whole portion, right? All the 3 hours, normal Akamai web traffic, right? I feel like it's a fairly popular website. Then we kick in, we turn it on. That's just normal HTTP. We're like, hey, let's see what happens when we flip over to FTP.
It goes dark.
Invisible to them.
I can't see
Akamai
it.
didn't even see it. So we were still holding those connections open, but we were not triggering any rules on Akamai or anything, right? We didn't dump enough money in there to cause them a headache, right? So say we're twice this, right? Say we're even twice above this graph if FTP was very successful. Remember, the FTP bypass only works in Firefox, so that that plays into it. How many browsers are out
I
there?
feel we have to state again, we're using one campaign on one crappy ad network.
Right. But the FTP thing only works on Firefox. We weren't sure like how much. So I was actually kind of sad that this was invisible, but even though it's kind of cool that it's invisible, I really wanted to see how much this would have spiked more if that connection limit was gone in Firefox, outbound connection limit. But alas, we just have a really cool invisible attack instead. So they said, yeah, we have one more pretty picture here. So this is our attack again. That first dip is the FTP, and then we go again for the next couple hours until Michael basically begged us to turn it off because he was getting yelled at by other people. He said this was actually really cool. I got alerted a lot, from other parts of the company that didn't know this was going on. So he's like, oh, at least that works. This is great.
Well, they noticed an exceedingly large DOS attack, and he was getting notified going, what's going on?
He forwarded us an email chain. He's like, you guys made some trouble.
But it's kind of interesting, like the moment he said turn it off, we just turn it off and the ad network traffic goes away and it reduces to zero really fast.
So in talking with him about, okay, so how'd we do, right? Did we cause you, obviously we set off alarms, but your website was still fine and we never actually took it down. I believe the number he said was, I think we hit roughly a third of what would have caused them some headaches. Okay, so think if you run multiple campaigns over multiple times, or even dump more money in this and try to spike it even
like $300.
Yeah, $300, right?
More than one song.
Yeah.
Whoa, did you just do math up here? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a third of a Bitcoin.
We need to update our economic slides.
I could do Bitcoin math.
So these were some notes from Michael when he co-presented some of this updated research of why this was a cool attack compared to other denial of service attacks. So these are kind of things that we talked about. Why attack this way, right?
So yeah, we had really good distribution. We're IPs from all over the place, so it wasn't like knowing bad networks and weird ISPs. These are real users on DSL networks and at work and all sorts of things. They were overlapping with legitimate uses and users. There was no spoof sources. We weren't spoofing a thing. This is real traffic. The refer signature was legit because it was a browser coming from real locations. And yeah, they couldn't measure the FTP method because it went dark. That's a really good method. We also learned some other things that we're going to hold back.
So the important bullet here, I think, to focus on is the overlap of legitimate users, right? So one of the best ways to, or one of the popular ways to protect against this kind of thing is to start trying to block the bots that are causing this bad traffic, because usually they're not going to ever be legitimate users on your site. So just block them; it can go away. Here, I mean, these are normal people using their browsers, and it could have been us, it could have been any of you guys that just were on the website and an ad loaded and it ran our JavaScript, right? So if they started blocking you guys, that would not work, right? You can't do that. So one other just kind of headline here, I'll let you talk about this.
So we're doing this research, and it just so happens that there's this OpenX piece of software. It's a start your own advertising network, and it just happens to have a vulnerability in it. So you can always, if you can't use the advertising network on your own behalf, you can always hack them.
So who knows, like cPanel? You guys familiar with cPanel? This is kind of cPanel for advertising networks, right? Instead of like hosting providers and stuff like that. So this software that some advertising network admin panels used had a vuln, so you could just hack the ad network and get your ad in that way. We just decided to give them money.
So we're pretty confident in saying so right now with the way the system currently works, we can hit the slide, with the way the system currently works is that if you're not using a CDN of some kind, somebody like an active DDoS protection, a little bit of money in the advertising network will just wipe down anybody. So you're gonna have to CDN it if you hope to stay stable, because a targeted attack like this, there's just no way you're gonna be able to withstand that amount of traffic. And I'm constantly reminded by this tweet, I'm always tweeting out there about different web security challenges, and I remember this one that Kaminsky sends my way. He goes, "Nobody's breaking the web, dude. Not now, not ever." And so far, he's been right. And that's what we talk about here today, that if you look in the entire ecosystem of what we're doing, everybody is playing by their own set of incentives. It goes right by what Robert Johanssen said today. The advertising networks, they're there to generate code. The guys that are running websites, they're there to show ads. There's no real fix that we're aware of for this problem. We know what the technological solutions, but the challenge is no one's in the position to actually do the right thing and protect the user and protect website owners. The website owners can't protect themselves, the users can't protect themselves, and the browser vendors certainly aren't going to protect you because they're in on it. They're making money as a result. So this is the real web security challenges out there. We have a lot of the technological solutions, but not on a lot of the incentives out there. So I think we're going to have to rethink what solutions, who we do business with, how we do business with them, because right now the web's broken because the incentives are misaligned.
Yeah, this is usually the slide at the end of the presentation where we talk about how to
No, we have no fix.
warm and fuzzy and fix this.
Install an ad blocker.
Each other. Yeah.